tiny, big surprise, custom travel trailer built. Oh. And I had never driven across the United States before. And when I started traveling with my trailer, I started realizing there's so much more to this country than the West Coast. And more importantly, even before I got the trailer, driving out to Michigan to pick up the trailer is when I realized, about when I got to, I want to say Carson City, Nevada, I just felt this huge relief. And I didn't even know why. I'm driving down the highway and I just started crying and I didn't even know why. And it happened like that later that year, I drove north to go up to Washington State. And when I got to about Mount Shasta, the same thing happened to me. And I realized it is so stressful living in Silicon Valley that I think it was just this huge relief of being away from everything, from everyone. Like, no one person in particular. It was just the overall bubble of stress of living there. And every time I go back to California, it just felt like a shoe that didn't fit anymore. And so I decided to move, and I wasn't really sure where I'd go. I put it on Facebook to my friends that, I'm going through this change. I'm not going to stay here, but I don't know where I'm going. And the next thing I knew, I had over a dozen offers from friends that I knew personally, from people who I've been friends with online for years, saying, well, come here, bring your trailer. You can park on our acreage or come stay in our guest room and, see if you'd want to live in Colorado or Georgia or Kansas or, just Texas and all these different places. So it was kind of like, oh, wow, the country is my oyster. But I was accepted to compete in this art competition, this public art competition that I had learned about in the fall of 2013. And I was out here in Michigan. And so I thought, I didn't think the universe wants me to go to Michigan or else I wouldn't have been accepted to compete.
Sure.
And of course, the only person I knew in Michigan was my trailer builder. And he's like, well, come on out. So I came and I finished putting my entry together, and I took it to Grand Rapids and was just amazed. The venue that hosted me, that's a whole other story, but it was so serendipitous because they'd had origami cranes in their front window of their market before, and then they found out about me, so they invited me to be hosted there, and they invited me back for the next 4 years after that. So I was at the Grand Central Market in Delhi for 5 years.
Wow.
And it was only because of that competition, honestly, that when I moved here, I was thinking, well, I'd like to pursue my art, but I need to earn a living, so I'll do the web stuff, And then I realized when I moved here, my internet speed doesn't support web development. The highest speed we get out here is like 1.33, and it can be as low as like 0.4. Oh. So it's like, no, this is the universe telling me I'm not going to be a web developer. But the art prize visitors, because I would go each day for 19 days and usually about 7 hours a day and sit there to answer questions about my entry, because I took 4,000 tiny cranes. The first year I made 4 mobiles that represented the 4 seasons. And it was that reaction of people seeing them for the first time and them being so excited about them and asking me, well, is there something we can buy? Like, they wanted a piece of this to take with them. And I would just like wave them off and tell them I barely got the entry done. No, there's no product line. And then the second year I go to the same venue, many of the same people come back, and I have 4,000 new cranes, and they're like, is there something we can buy this year? I'm like, no, I'm still just kind of getting my feet on the ground here. But it was their interest and their enthusiasm and their encouragement that really made me think I could do this. I can, at the worst, eke out a living doing this, envisioning that I would just make affordable products for people to give as everyday gift kind of items, but then hopefully sell the finished mobiles, which would be thousands of dollars because they take about 3 months to make one mobile, start to finish. But I thought this could work. And so I came up with the name, the Tinygami name, which the word gami in Japanese, the word ori, O-R-I, means folded, and gami means paper. So I named my business Tiny Paper, translated. And that was great because I made up a word. So I grabbed the URL. I got all the social media platform usernames and everything fell into place. And I then very quickly realized that there's more to it than just making small products to sell, because then I had a publisher contact me and ask if I would co-author a book for pay. And then I've had people hire me to come do public speaking. I've had people hire me to come be like corporate entertainment at cocktail parties, where I sit with my little tray of paper and I fold tiny things and just give them away to guests and bring a couple of my mobiles to display. It's just the uniqueness of it, and the fact that it's giving them a favor, a little party favor, makes it appealing on that level to people. So I realized, as long as I'm willing to do anything miniature origami related that comes my way, then this is a viable business.
Yeah.
And it's what I say to people who are skeptics, who will, mostly online sometimes, kind of sneer that full time, really. And I just go in all positive and just say, yeah, can you believe it? And I'll list those things out for them. If I do this, and this, yes, it can be a full-time business. So
yeah,
it's what I do.
That's great. Is there, I interviewed another origami artist, I think about a year ago. And
Ross.
Yes, Ross.
Yeah, I follow him on Instagram.
Yeah. So he
wonderful.
I spent a lot of time asking him about how he suddenly got basically Instagram famous, and that's where he gets a lot of his commissions from. Is there a particular outlet, social media or otherwise, where you get most of your commissions, or do they come more organically?
Both. I would say both. I also started selling the small product line pieces at a consignment store here in Greenville and one in Grand Rapids. I have an Etsy shop, and I had been active on Instagram since 2014 when I moved to Michigan, had kind of given up blogging and instead shifted over to Instagram. Okay. And what really launched things for me earlier this year was the company 60 Second Docs contacted me last November and asked if they could do a feature about my work. And so they sent, and to be honest, I didn't realize what a huge opportunity that was. I had gone and looked at YouTube to see, what kind of videos do they make? It's like, oh, these are great videos. And the videos got tens of thousands of hits. And I'm like, well, that's, legitimate. Sure, I'll do this. And then they launched my video, and everything changed overnight, because I didn't realize that the videos on YouTube that have, say, 30,000 views were getting 3 million views over on Facebook. And if it was 50,000 views on YouTube, it was 5 million views on Facebook.
Yeah.
And so my Etsy shop blew up. I had set my turnaround time on orders for 3 days to 5 days, I think. And within the first 2 days, I got over 40 orders.
Oh, wow.
And before it occurred to me, I need to extend my promise date out. And so February was really hectic. I was just doing production morning, noon, and night. And I found that, of course, created a huge surge of interest online. But I was already getting interest from attending Art Prize every year, being in the same venue for 5 years. I think most artists even artists who participated for 5 years, they change venues all the time, but I stayed at the same one so that everyone would know where to find me. So for me, it's like a high school reunion. I know people now from pretty much the moment I got here to Michigan, because they come each year at Art Price to visit with me and see what I made, but catch up on a personal level too. And then when I put things on Instagram, people will see things there and they'll contact me either through private message or they just come find me over on Etsy. But then I have people who send me messages by email and through Facebook, and it gets a little confusing sometimes because there's so many requests coming in from so many different directions to keep track of them. So then I had to start a log. So, okay, well, this person's inquiry was on this platform and that person's was over there and this person was from so-and-so. And then just even my friends will contact me for orders. Also, my friends in California, I've shipped orders out, or in Washington where I was born and raised. I just shipped something up there last week. So it's a lot of opportunities coming from many different directions, which of course as a solo entrepreneur makes it very challenging because you're still doing everything yourself from that administrative standpoint, and the shipping and the production and the marketing and the pop-up markets and the janitorial work and all of those things. So I feel like I'm always busy. There's always something for me to be working on to help build my business. But I'm grateful for having had that experience of the bridal accessory business and the web design business, because everything just keeps coming together more and more the further forward I've moved. So,
yeah. So when you're working on a project, where do your ideas come from, and how do you know, like when you're doing your larger pieces, how you're going to arrange them and how you're going to mix colors in to get a certain feeling?
I've always had this ability. I call it, I see pictures in my head. And I'll think of perhaps a theme. At Art Prize, the first few years, it was easy because I would take 3 to 4 mobiles, and each mobile would represent a different Japanese tradition or custom. So I'd have something cultural to share with the visitors who would come and talk. And many times they've been to Japan and lived in Japan. I've never even visited Japan yet. And so then they're sharing the culture with me from having lived there. And that made it really fun. But 2 years ago, I decided to make it more personal. I had wanted to do a piece that dealt with the Japanese American internment for many years. I had this picture in my head of a set of 1,000 cranes folded of yellow paper, because that's how the Japanese Americans were viewed back during World War II. It was just the color of their skin. I wanted to incorporate miniature barbed wire. And years ago, I actually made a sample test strand of tiny barbed wire just to see if I could do it. And I could, and it makes you bleed just like regular sized barbed wire when you stab it into your fingers.
Yeah, wow.
So I'd saved this tiny strand of barbed wire for years, and I ended up doing it 2 years ago, the series of 3 sets. And I knew that was the one I wanted to do, but I also didn't want to present that piece in a negative light. And so then I had to come up with a story in my own mind of how do I do this? And the process I just used was wanting to bring it back to something positive and hopeful. So it went from the injustice of the internment to the process of healing. And the second mobile represented this beautiful Japanese art form called kintsugi, where broken pottery is mended with gold. And I ran fracture lines through the actual strands of the mobile where all the cranes were folded from blue paper, and then these beautiful gold lines were cutting through at all different angles and places. And then the third one I called my Filled with Love set, where they were 1,000 tiny plastic cranes, each with a tiny paper heart tucked up inside its body. Mm-hmm. And so the story for me represented my family's internal